Close the eyes. Breathe. Connect with the breath. And place your right hand on your heart, left hand on the belly. And as you breathe in, feel the entire torso expand. And as you breathe out, feel the torso integrate, contract gently, soften. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, know that you're being nourished. And breathing out, let that be gratitude for nourishment. Breathing in, know that you are receiving all the gifts of the universe. And breathing out, let that breath be gratitude for all those gifts. Allow the process of breathing in and breathing out to be an integrating process. One that acknowledges all the divinity, all the work, all the gratitude, all the possibilities. Let it bring you comfort. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Taking a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upama Shravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashranvanuti Bisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajenivati Dina Mavitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novachamushati Shrinotu Vagdeviyai Namaha. Gently releasing the hands down, fluttering open the eyes. So today, I thought we would talk about equanimity and its relationship to detachment and the common misunderstandings that exist both within and outside of the spiritual community with regard to both of those things. I had a student come up to me one time, it's not just one, many, at different times, and say, I don't get detachment. Like, isn't it bad not to care at all? I mean, shouldn't I care? You say detachment is not about not caring. And they looked very puzzled by that. And I said, the question is, do you understand what caring is? Well, yeah, of course. Like, I care about animal rights and about women's rights and about justice. And like, okay. And those are great things. You should care about those things. We should all care about those things. Because if those things are not in a healthy place, then there's additional suffering in the world, and it's needless suffering. So we should care about those things. Why do you care about those things? Well, because they're not right. It makes me mad to see when someone is mistreated or when you hear about injustices. It makes me angry. Okay. Why does it make you angry? Because it's wrong. And say, okay, why else does it make you angry? I don't like it. That's not caring. That's not caring. Yes, it is. No, it's not. It's discomfort of an irritating kind that you haven't cultivated within yourself the resiliency to stand up with and to stand up to. So when we don't have resiliency cultivated within us, we revert to anger. We revert to being irritated. The reality is this. Many of us don't really know what we care about. We only know what makes us really uncomfortable, what we don't like to have to see. And so we say, if I don't like what I'm feeling when I'm seeing something, then I must care about the thing that I'm seeing. And the reality is, no, it's just scaring the hell out of you. And the reaction, you're calling caring. But it's not. It's escapism. It's, I don't want to have to see that. I don't want to have to know that. So what is caring then? What is it to care? Well, caring is an action word. It's an action. So to care is to serve. Period. To care is to serve. Any of you ever cared for a loved one who was ill? Right. So you know exactly what caring is. It's serving. So if it is upsetting to the mind, the heart, and your being to see social injustice and animals injured and human rights being trampled on, then you need to be of service in order to realize the caring part. And you also need to acknowledge that some part of what you are experiencing when you witness those things has nothing to do with caring, but everything to do with your own unsettled fears that you might be next. An unacknowledged fear. You might be next. I have always been an animal rights activist. I have always been a human rights activist. I have, from before my preteen years, as a child, I would sit at the table and be like, that was an animal, I don't want to eat that. And then, of course, meat and potatoes, Irish family, smack you upside the head, so eat your food. There are children starving in Africa, right? But because within each and every one of us, from early childhood, and so if your child comes to you at any point in time and says, Mommy, Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, I am having a problem with this. Don't just smack them upside the head and tell them to conform. Investigate with them what it is that they're feeling. Because there is inside each and every one of us, from birth, an inherent caring, a call to be of service, a call to understand the cause of suffering and to work toward the alleviation of it. This is why the mantra Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu is so very important. May all beings everywhere be happy, easeful, peaceful. But then we have to also understand that I have something to do with that. Tejashree walks into the ashram, and I can either make her feel welcome or not. It's all in a sound. It's all in a physical expression, right? Noelle has a posture she's having difficulty with. I can either make her feel comfortable and safe in asking for support, or I can make her feel bad about herself. Right? A stranger is passing me on the street. I can either set off an energy that makes them cross the street to the other side, or that lets them be at ease. So when we say Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, we are inherently implying that we have a responsibility there to care, to serve, by way of our words, our thoughts, and our actions. Now, what does all this have to do with equanimity? It has everything to do with equanimity. Everything. Because it's not until we break the hold that our fears and our anger has over us that we can come to a place of peaceful service. Much of the time in our life, when we come to service, not all of the time, but there is definitely a good percentage of it, that our service is actually a reaction. It's actually a reaction. Somebody comes to you and says, I have a headache. Do you happen to have a Tylenol? And you start shuffling through your bag and you can't get it to them fast enough. On the one hand, you would say, well, that's very kind that you gave them the Tylenol. But the question is, did you give them the Tylenol understanding that they had a headache, that they are in pain, that they are suffering? Or did you give them a Tylenol so that you didn't have to hear any more about it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you? Right? Do we even stop to think about these things? Who in here has never had a headache? Who in here has had a bad headache? So you know what that pain is like. There's inherently two voices inside of yourself. One that is feeling compassion for the pain that this person is in, and another that doesn't want to remember it or be reminded of it. It's such a dilemma, isn't it? I know. It's so bonkers. It's just such a dilemma. And so your choice, and this is where the awareness comes in, right? So this is awareness, and then we'll talk about the equanimity. Awareness that this person is suffering, and that you might have a little something to support the alleviation of that suffering. So let me serve you by giving you this Tylenol or this whatever it happens to be, a peppermint inhaler, whatever your thing is. Let me give this to you, knowing full well and accepting that you are currently in a state of suffering, and I am here to be of service to you and not to recoil into my own fear, not to push you away, not to get rid of the discomfort, that I'm here to be of service, that I am caring for you. It's an action word. Equanimity allows us to have that awareness, because equanimity is achieved when we have broken the bondage that our anger and our suffering has kept us in. When we acknowledge, number one, suffering is universal. In this embodiment, it's what there is. 50% of the time, if not more, it's suffering. And even when we think we're happy, we're still suffering because there's always a minimum of two voices going on inside. The one that's saying, oh my God, I'm absolutely loving this experience. And the other one that's saying, it's going to be over soon. Always those two voices at a minimum. Equanimity is neither of those voices. Equanimity is suffering is universal. There's no sense in denying it, trying to avoid it, pushing it away in an egotistical kind of a way, right? There's no sense in that because it's everywhere. How many of you sitting in this room right now have pain in your body or pain in your mind, a pain in your heart? I have a good friend who messaged me this morning who said, this time of the year is always so difficult. I really often just want to be by myself and alone, but then there's the loneliness. And I'm choosing to come and to be with community. And I thought that was the most beautiful testament, right? The most beautiful testament, truly. To recognize the bondage that our fears, our anger, our sadness and sorrow hold us in, and then to break that bondage by way of coming to Sangha, coming to community, coming to the teachings, and being part of that, which is a service. Because if you don't come, this room is empty, So equanimity is neither of those voices. Equanimity is the awareness of suffering, the awareness of its universal nature, the awareness that it's not all there is, the awareness that there is enjoyment, the awareness that there is preference between these two things, and the choice to not be pushed or pulled either way. And instead, to be caring. Not, I guess I have to make dinner again because I'm supposed to care, and care is an action word, It's not, I guess I'm going to hold the door open for this older person who's walking so slow and it's so irritating, but I'm going to stand here and open because care is an action word. That's not it. That's attitude. That's egotistical discomfort. It's cultivating within your heart the ability to recognize. This elder person walking toward the door, they're walking slower. Can you imagine? So now I'm getting older, right? I'm not that old, I'm 61, whatever. But I am getting older, and I'm noticing changes. And it's bringing in my mind attention to an interesting dilemma about aging. And we say it all the time, but then we run the hell away from it. My body used to be different. I used to be able to sit on the floor and stand right up without any kind of hands on the floor. To be able to hop from the top stair to the bottom. Wouldn't do that now. Used to be able to walk for miles with no sensations in my knees or thighs at all, except maybe a little bit of tired after a while. An elder person has difficulty walking from their car to the door of the store without feeling they might fall. They have pain. The compassionate heart sees that, knows that, does not pity that, but asks one question and one question only. What is the question?
How can I serve?
What was that?
How can I serve?
How can I serve? How can I serve? You can't take away the pain. You can't take away the aging changes. You can't take those things away. That is part of their path. It's what they have to experience in this life. But what you can do is not be part of the pain. What you can do is hold the door open and smile and ask them how their day was and alleviate that which can be alleviated, like the loneliness. And you can do so with a heart of genuine compassion. Not because it's somehow required of you. Not because you're obligated. Not because you might feel bad later if you don't. But because simply it is what you are there to do. So you take all those other thoughts and you don't feed into them. And when we are able to come into a place of service like that, where we are not concerned for any inconvenience or benefit to ourselves, and when we can really move into the action-oriented word care, you will have achieved equanimity. When it doesn't matter if they say thank you. And when it doesn't even matter if they say, hey, you smart-ass young'un, get the hell out of my way, I can do it myself. Your feelings aren't hurt, right? You don't internalize and say, man, what a mean old person. I'm not going to be that mean when I get older. Right? None of that. You just recognize this is the human condition. Sometimes the greatest care is to open the door, and sometimes the greatest care is to give way. So that if a person is not able to receive your service of their own karmas and resistances, then you recognize that and you just move out of the way. What do you think? Equanimity. It's not caring. It's actually caring so deeply and so honestly and so completely that you simply serve without concern for yourself. And it's not easy. Because we've been raised a certain way, haven't we? Your grandmother or grandfather or mother or father gave you a gift at Christmas or your birthday or whatever day of the year they gave you a gift, and you opened it up and you were like, oh my gosh. Don't you say thank you? You've been trained to expect thank you. You've been trained to expect you're welcome. You've been trained to smile when you don't want to. You've been trained, programmed. So what yoga teaches us is that it's time to deprogram and to recognize that you don't always have to smile, but kindness is necessary. That you don't have to expect a thank you, but you should offer them out of kindness. That you don't have to expect anything from others, because the only person in this entire world that you can control in any way at all is yourself. So you don't say thank you out of obligation. You say it out of kindness, if you choose to say it. If you choose not to say it because just a moment ago I said we're all programmed into the thank yous, don't let it be this. Well, I don't say thank you because, I don't have to. I'm deprogramming myself. Right? No, that's not it. It's not how much resistance you can bolster against, the man. It's not that. It's not. There's a genuine gratitude that comes by way of equanimity. There's a genuine gratitude. So that if somebody handed you a beautiful red apple, said, this is for you. So Shiva Das, just pretend I'm giving you a beautiful red apple. It's so easy to be grateful for a beautiful red apple, right? But now I give you the only apple that I have. And that apple is bruised. And maybe has a little hole in it, indicating that there might have been a worm munching on it, And I give that to you. Are you equally grateful?
I hope I am.
What was that?
Yes, I hope so.
I hope so too, right? And that's the correct answer. Yes, I hope so. I hope I am equally grateful. We get this idea in our mind because we do lack equanimity, significant lack of equanimity. We get this idea in our mind that the gift has to be bigger, better, perfect, no blemishes. If you hand someone a flower and a petal is falling off because it's dried out, that's not good enough. Throw those flowers away, waste them, and go buy a $24.99 bouquet of perfect flowers. But life is not perfect. And offerings are not perfect. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, a single blade of grass means more than all of the fancy offerings. When that single blade of grass is given with a pure heart. The perfection does not happen in the object outside of oneself. The perfection happens in the act of service. Does that make sense? So if all you have is a rose whose petals are falling off and they're brown and it's wilted and it's what most people would look at as dead and unattractive, but it's what you have. And you place it on the altar with a whole heart, then it becomes perfect. Equanimity is what allows you to know that. It's what allows you to be that. It's what allows you to leave behind the preference between the perfectly red rose with the perfectly blooming petals versus the browning rose that might not be so attractive. Equanimity allows you to put that off to the side, those attitudes, not just about the rose, but about everything. And to say instead, to ask the question, how am I of service? What is the quality of my care? So you can ask yourself moving forward, when you hear yourself saying, well, I care, do you or are you afraid? Usually it's a combination, which makes it tricky. My mother was in a very devastating car accident when I was 15. And it left her in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. And at some point she had to have her leg partly amputated. And so she was disabled. And I used to be afraid. Like she drove a car and everything like that, like she was very, like, she could take good care of herself. But at that point in time, because that's what, like 40 something years ago, right? 45, 47, 48 years ago, whatever. At that point in time, there weren't ADA laws. There were not handicap parking spaces. There were not doors that were required to be wide enough for a wheelchair to move through. There was really, literally, no consideration whatsoever. So we would, go shopping, food shopping. We would park the car, and if there was a parking spot up front, and she was going to turn into that spot, and someone would take that spot from her, and then she would have to park way in the back of the parking lot, I would get so angry. On one part of it, my anger came from a place of not wanting her to suffer needlessly. But on the other part of it, and the much larger part of it, my anger came from a place of fear that greater distance was going to somehow hurt her. And then I was going to have to caregive even more than I already was. And I didn't want that to have to be the case. It takes a lot to admit that. It's very difficult when a child ends up being the one caring for the parent. It's very difficult. Despite our differences, despite our difficulties, I loved my mother very much. And I did whatever it was that I could do in order to be some kind of a support. But that doesn't mean that I didn't resent it also. And it doesn't mean that I did not resent that person for taking that front parking space from my mother. Because, she's in a wheelchair. And now I have to somehow maneuver her all the way through the parking lot. And what happens if I screw up? What happens if, I'm not watching close enough and I hit a pothole? What happens if a car comes around? What happens? So this is what we think about. But really, the reality is it didn't matter where the car was being parked. The only thing that mattered was that I could be of service to her. And of course, I didn't realize that at the time. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that making sense? At the time, as a 16-year-old young, angry person, I didn't realize all of that. Now I look at it and I realize it. And it's okay that I didn't realize it back then. It's okay that you didn't realize it back then. It's okay that you didn't realize it yesterday. What matters is that once you do realize it, don't forget it. To the best of your ability, don't forget it. The most important question you can ask yourself in any moment: how can I be of service? How can I break the bonds between my fear, my anger, my sorrow, my guilt, my expectations, including the ones that make us happy? How can I break those bonds so that I can just show up and provide what is needed outside of my opinion of what is needed? Because sometimes we say, I know what's needed, but it's actually not, because you thought that elder person wanted you to open the door for them, but the reality is, in that given moment, they didn't. No. So now you need to be humble and acknowledge that you thought you knew what was needed. I'm not telling you not to open doors for elders. By all means do. But don't open it for them out of pity. Open it for them out of respect, out of kindness, and out of service. And then, when that grouchy little old man comes along and smacks you with his cane and tells you don't be smart, he can open his own door, say, oh, I wasn't being smart, I was just trying to be of service. But mean it. And don't walk away called him a grouchy little old man, unless you're just teasing with yourself. What questions do you have? What comments? Yes?
I would just say, if someone would ask you to define equanimity,
Say that one more time.
to define it, like how to define equanimity, like in the simplest terms. Like I'm trying. I like
Equanimity is non-attachment.
That's it.
That's it. It's
Okay.
non-attachment. Equanimity is not being attached. And so we have these two words within yoga. We have equanimity and we have non-attachment. And they're very much related to one another, right? Non-attachment is the practice of cutting the bonds. The bond between you and your anger and the reactions that you have because of that. Of you and your loneliness and the reactions that you have because of that. And you and your passions and the reactions that you have because of that. And when those bonds are cut through the practice of detachment, as long as it's healthy and that you're not forcing it or fooling yourself, once those bonds are cut, the freedom that you feel is equanimity. The ability to show up is equanimity. The ability to not be torn apart is equanimity. Yeah. It's big. It's a great question. What other questions or reflections? Yeah, Summer?
I'm reminded of when you were talking about the gifts and the thank yous, at how simple and easy it is to receive a wilted flower from a grandchild of a 4-year-old. But all of a sudden that changes when it's your spouse.
Oh,
And
yeah.
You ask for something specific and that's not what you got.
So true. It's so, so true. And we call that context. And it's interesting because we teach the child that to say thank you is polite. That to give the flower is polite. And we don't stop to think that the way that the thing is received also has a politeness to it. So the spouse gives the wilted flower, and we're like, what the heck is this? That's not thoughtful. And that's not a polite response. So we're not even living up to the lessons that we tried to teach the little one. Oh, we're so full of hypocrisy. Well, next time someone gives you socks for Christmas, just be like, these are the best socks in the whole world. Be like, what's his name on Harry Potter?
Dobby.
What?
Dobby.
Yeah. Dobby. Socks. Master gave me socks. I'm free. Yeah. Free from the expectation that it should have been something else like diamonds. That's such a potent character, truly, right? Oh my gosh. What other questions or reflections? Yes?
How do you deal with someone close to you who seemingly always needs care? And you've offered it other ways, but every time you see them, they have a headache. And at some point, they don't notice that you might not be well, and there you are holding your tray at all times.
This is a really big question. It's a very important question. So how do we deal with someone who is constantly asking for care? First thing, are they asking for care or are they asking for attention? First thing. Second thing, if you decide that they are asking for attention, are you harming them by giving it to them? Because you're empowering that behavior. But I do have a headache. Okay. If you do have a headache, and this is an ongoing headache, one that tends to never go away, that's an issue. That's actually got the potential of being a medical issue. Maybe a Tylenol is not the answer. Maybe a doctor's visit is. Maybe looking at whatever is being asked, and it can be painful to look at somebody we care about, somebody we love, and to acknowledge that some part of what they're doing might actually be more for attention and less for necessity. And then you need to become a very good communicator so that you're not saying to them, you're not really suffering. Because yes, they are. If they weren't suffering, they wouldn't be looking for attention. And become a problem solver. Acknowledging that there's going to be times when this individual actually is, and I don't know if this is exactly what's happening there or not, but there will be times when this person actually does need care. But does that mean that you always have to be the person to give that care? And the answer to that is both yes and no. Yes to always being of service, but sometimes the service is a difficult service that also entails letting a person become self-sufficient, letting a person find other ways of caring for themselves, letting a person find other ways of expressing their needs. Does that make sense? And it's really hard to know which one it is. It's very difficult. Now, on the flip side of that, what I'll say is, when you have an understanding of unity, and not just an understanding, when you have faith in unity, when you have faith in the idea that the energy of your being is none other than the energy of divinity, and that you, in and of yourself, are that energy in motion, and that energy can never be depleted, then you can serve that person whatever they're asking for. And it takes nothing from you, because you know that it's endless. The energy is just flowing through you, and you're not the one giving. You're not the one giving. And therefore you cannot be depleted or tired. But the thing is, we don't have full faith in that. And because we don't have full faith in that, the ego comes forward and says, please don't ask me for another thing because I can't give anymore. I cannot give anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? So there's two parts to this. The first is you want to be of service. So be of the kind of service as best you can that is healthy for both of you in your limited perception of what this person needs and what you need and what's happening in the situation. But the second is work on your faith. Work on your faith, knowing that you can give a lot more than what you think you're capable of giving without being depleted at all. People say all the time, they're like, don't you get tired? And I'm like, well, my body gets tired. Sure, my body gets tired. But do I get tired? No. Why? Because I'm not the one doing it. How do you do so much? How do you run an ashram here, set up a space in Ireland, travel this place, do that, deal with students? How do you do that? I'm not the one doing it. And you know when I do get tired is when I think I am. When I think I am the one doing it, I get tired. And then I have to correct myself. And I have to reorient myself. Sit down and meditate more, chant more. Remember, this is not here because like I'm some kind of special person. I'm really grateful for those people who think that I have something like special. I don't. I don't. It's just this. In as plain of words as I can put it. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I got sick and tired of being lost in my own wallowing, lost in my own suffering, lost in my own story. And I said, I'm not going to be lost there anymore. There's too much. So Ma, just point me in a direction and push. I'll go. Just let me know what you want me to do. Please make it obvious, because I'm a little dense at times. Just push me off in that direction, and I'll do it for as long as you want me to do it. The only thing I ask is that you make it obvious. Because, my human mind has a tendency to make decisions based on expectations. And I don't want to do that. I want to make decisions based on what thine will, not mine. So those are the two things, and I know that those are really kind of like difficult, and I'm not speaking to the whole story of what's happening there either, because I don't know the whole story. But when a person is approaching us and asking us for constant care, there's a couple of things that can be happening there. They need constant care, but are you the proper person to be giving it to them if it's that chronic? And second, they need attention because they're suffering and they don't know what to do with themselves. And it's usually some combination of both. The other thing is, if in those interactions one is getting depleted, tired, frustrated, aggravated, then one is forgetting. It's not my will, it's thine will. And it's also not my energy, it's thine energy. And thine energy is endless. So you can give 1,000,000 Tylenols to 1,000,000 different people with headaches and you will never be depleted. But the reality is that we're human. And it takes a lot to get to the point where we really accept that. So in the meantime, we struggle. The struggle is real. It absolutely is. So you can sit down with someone and you can say to them, a person like that in your life, and say, I feel called to be of the greatest service, but I don't know how. Because it seems like the things that you're asking me for aren't really helping. So let's look at this together. Let's talk about this together and see what really is the greatest benefit that I can provide for you when you're feeling like this. What is it that's needed? And am I the proper person to be providing it? I hope that's supportive. Yeah.
Sometimes I think in a situation, like with people, that it gets aggravating, and frustrating. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what helps me is I think, okay, stop, this person is unaware and they're incapable at this point in their life. So then it kind of takes off the personal part.
Just don't turn that to pity. It's very difficult. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. They are not capable. You're just calling the apple red. You know what I'm saying?
And I don't know if that's the right thing, but sometimes that helps me.
Well, I think that clarity requires that we say difficult things. But the heart requires that we don't turn those difficult statements into a form of pity. Oh, this poor soul, they're so far behind me. They're not aware, No. They're ignorant. I'm also ignorant. We're all ignorant. Yay for the party, But we recognize that in others more easily than we recognize it in ourselves because they're a reflection of us. So we can look and we can recognize, we can say to ourselves, this person doesn't recognize, what I think I am recognizing. And so for that, I will have additional compassion. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's perfectly fine. But just remember that the moment that you become better than that you start comparing them to your own clarity and, elevated status, that's an issue. And then you need to come down a couple rungs for sure before someone knocks you off that ladder. Yeah. Oh, goodness. It's being human. It's bonkers. Yes.
I just want to share a bit of an internal struggle that I'm reflecting on. It occurred about 10 years ago when I was caregiving for my grandfather, who was 96, and he suffered from edema in his legs and his ankles. He had chronic knee pain for probably 10 years or so. He would get injections occasionally. So we all knew he was in pain when he walked, but yet the physical therapist said walking was good for his circulation and good for him. So as his caregiver, I would sometimes put him into positions where he had to walk more, thinking it was good. So it's a funny, wanting to alleviate the suffering of the pain of walking, but also encouraging him to walk more than perhaps he desired to do.
Yeah. And the clarity there, it's very hard. These decisions are not easy, You watch a movie and they solve a problem in 90 minutes. And usually those problems are not solvable in life. So, and that's the reality of it, is that these decisions are difficult decisions. They're going to continue to be difficult decisions. But we can utilize the spiritual wisdom to guide us a little bit, to support us in knowing that sometimes we do need to make tough decisions. We do need to coax them to get up and to walk a little bit, And we can acknowledge that this is not easy. It's most definitely not going to be easy for the person being coaxed. Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely difficult. But what's the option? What's the alternative to that?
Let him be sedentary and just be in more discomfort, increasingly compounding until he dies.
Right. Absolutely. In hospitals now, when people are either on hospice or they're in the hospital with just the hospital personnel, the part of what they do with those who are in the final phases of life is that they move their body. They come in, they massage their feet, they move their feet. Why do they do that? To minimize the physical discomfort because of the process that they're in. And all you did was that. That's exactly what you did. You were supporting the movement of the body in order to eventually help to minimize some of the suffering. But initially, the person receiving that, they're having their own reaction to it. They're having their own reaction to it. Oh, goodness. And people have reactions to things, right? Some people have verbal reactions. Ow, that hurts. And then suddenly you think you hurt them. What you don't understand is that that's their reaction. That's their fear. That's the way that they're coping. So just because you help them up out of a chair and they're going, ow, 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 it's not you doing it. You don't know that. Does that make sense? Yeah, but we take ownership over it. Guess what we do? We attach ourselves to it. It must be me. Because it's always me. In yoga, that's called ashmita. It's called self-centeredness in a negative way, right? It's called egotism. It's putting me at the center of the story, and it's not. His ankles hurt. His ankles, he's going to say ow whether you're standing him up or sitting him down. That's the reality of it. So don't interject yourself into the middle of that. You're supporting someone. Period. And they're going to have to process that however they process it. It's so hard, though. Because we don't want to feel like we're causing pain. Right? We don't want to feel like we're the one. We don't want to feel like, well, if I say no to them asking, if I say I can't provide that to you, then I'm causing them pain. We don't want to feel that way. So that takes us back to the very first statement that I made, that our caring is based on what? Fear, anger, sorrow. But it should be in service. Or it could be in service. No. Let me do a time check. We have 2 minutes. Any other questions or reflections? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for asking your questions today and for making your reflections, for letting me use you as an example, hypothetical example, of course. Equanimity and non-attachment. These two things are very related to one another because you cannot have equanimity as long as you are attached. And what are we attached to? Well, pretty much freaking everything. But mostly our fears, our emotions, and our expectations. So take some time this week. And when you find that you're in a position to be of service, before you do anything, remind yourself, caring is an act of service. And service can be done with equanimity so that there is no expectation associated with it. You don't even expect that the Tylenol is going to take the headache away. You don't even expect that. You don't expect that that standing the grandfather up and helping him to walk a little bit is going to take all his pain away. Did you expect that? No, of course not. You don't even have expectations that your service is going to be received. You don't have expectations. You just provide the service. Period. And then let me know how easy that is. Because it's not. It's not. And then we are going to feel some sorrow. Once we start kind of investigating this, we're going to feel some sorrow. It's going to trigger sorrow within us. It's going to trigger loneliness. It's going to trigger something deep within us that's going to sound kind of like this. But it feels so good when people say thank you. It feels so good to know that it's actually helping them. It feels so good to know I'm needed. So that's not caring. That's the flip side. That's Ashmita. That's putting yourself into the center again. So remind yourself, this isn't actually loneliness. This is the ego playing tricks with me. This is the ego suggesting to me that to be of service without the ego is actually bringing me loneliness. Therefore, I should continue to inject myself into it, inject my expectations and my attachments into it. There's no greater beauty than when you stand on a mountain and witness the sunrise. In Maine, there's a mountain called Sunrise Mountain. I think it's Millennial Mountain or something like that, but we call it Sunrise Mountain because it was the first place that the sun was going to rise on January 1st, 2000. So it was called the Millennium Mountain, the Sunrise Mountain. And thousands upon thousands of people made their way to that mountain to see the first sunrise of the new millennium. And how many of you have seen a sunrise? Any sunrise? What's beautiful about that sunrise? You're witnessing it. You're seeing it. And you're not involved at all. And because you have not put yourself into the center of it with expectations and emotions and all those other things, you can actually appreciate the beauty of the thing, unencumbered by those other attachments. But the moment that you look at the sun and say, well, you know, in my opinion, you should be a little more red this morning. Do you see what I'm saying? So while it might feel lonely or sad or something initially, it might trigger something like that initially, in the long run, you're going to see so much more appreciate so much more and have a sense of uplifted enjoyment that's not based on attachment or expectation. But it doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen eventually. I'll stop there, because we could keep going. Let's sit tall, close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om and the All Beings mantra. Take a nice breath in. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. And another thing that you can say to support yourself in this journey is whenever you're doing something on behalf of someone else in service, you can say silently to yourself, this is divine energy giving this to you. This is God giving this to you. Not that you're God, but that there's that energy inside of you that is. And that is handing you what is needed. That is what's making this gesture. Not me. That. I'm just witnessing it. You didn't make the sunrise. You just witnessed it.